Hey guys, so here's another video on how to use the calculator. Now this one is about square roots and exponents. So a square root is any symbol that looks like this, almost like a check mark with part of a box attached to it. And they have a number inside of them. And then exponents are anytime you have a big number with this tiny number up at the top above it. And so what you do to put a square root in, so you go to your calculator and you're going to hit the second button and then the x squared button. Because you can see the square root symbol is in green above that button, so that means we have to hit the second button to get that. And then, so we want to get the square root of 25, so we're gonna hit 25 and then enter, and we get 5. So 5 is our answer. So the square root of 25 is 5. Now let's say I wanted to get the square root of 64. So again, I'd hit second, x2, 64, and then enter, and I get 8. Now, we can also use the calculator for exponents. So exponents are just this tiny number next to this bigger number here. And to do exponents, the only button we have to hit is what's called the caret key. I call it the TP key sometimes. So what you do, you hit your big number first. So in this case, I'm going to click 3. Then we hit our TP button, the number 4, and we hit enter. So all you do is type your big number first, the TP button, and then your little number or your exponent, and hit enter. So anytime you get one of these exponents, all you have to do is hit this TP key or this caret key. Now sometimes they give you these problems as adding, subtracting, dividing, multiplying, and they have exponents attached to them. And we can still put these in our calculator as well. So we're just going to type it in like it says. I have 6 exponent 2 plus 8 exponent 2, and I'm going to hit enter. And so when I put these into my calculator, I get 100. And it's the same thing if we wanted to divide. So I have 9 squared, or 9 exponent 2, divided by 2 squared, and that gives me 20.25. And so that is what I do with exponents. Now, you probably noticed that if you have the exponent with the number 2, you can hit this x squared button. But if the exponent is not the number 2, if it's a 4, 7, whatever, then we hit this caret key, or the TP button as I call it. So that's how we do square roots, but the opposite, or that's how we do exponents, but the opposite of exponents are square roots. And so to get the square root of something, we hit second and then the x2 button. And then we just type the number that's in our square root symbol or inside our check mark, as I like to call it. So we have 128, and then I'm going to hit enter. Now you will notice I get this weird number. I get 8 square root of 2. So if that happens, a lot of the times on the GED, they will want you to get a decimal. So anytime we get this, that tells me that I need to go and I need to change the mode of my calculator. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit clear and then hit this button that says mode. And see here it is highlighted math print. But what I want highlighted is the word classic. So I'm going to scroll down until it's flashing and hit enter. And then I'm going to hit second and mode to quit. And then I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to hit second, x2 for my square root symbol, and you'll notice it has a parentheses next to it. So if there's a parentheses next to it, that is telling you that you are going to be able to get a decimal from this square root. So I'm going to type 128 and hit enter. So in this case, I get a decimal. I get 11.31, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going to round that to 11.3. So anytime you get an answer that looks like this on your calculator, you need to change the mode of your calculator. So again, you hit mode, you change it to classic instead of math print, and then it'll put it in decimals for you. So that is 11.3. So now we're going to do the same thing with this. So another thing that we can do with exponents, we can even put math problems inside of them. So I have 56 plus 65, and I'm just going to close my parentheses for this one, and then I'm going to hit enter. And when I do that, I get 11. So you can get the square root of a subtraction problem, of an addition problem. That is not a problem. You just go ahead and type it in, close your parentheses, and hit enter. Now this problem, it's the shape of a square root, but it's got a 3 to the side of it. I apologize for my handwriting, but that is the number 3. This thing is called a cube root. So with square roots, we are trying to figure out what number multiplied by itself gives us that number. Cube roots, we're trying to figure out what number times itself 3 times gives us this number on the inside. So to put this in our calculator, we type the number 3 first. So always type the number 3 first if you're getting a cube root. Then we're going to hit second, and then we're going to hit our TP button. And then you just type your inside number. So 5, 8, 3, 2, enter, and I get 18. But let's say I have a different one. Let's say I want to get the cube root of 8. So again, just like this one, I'm going to hit 3, second, caret key or my TP button, and then hit 8 and enter. And I get the number 2. And so that is how you do cube roots. Now, another thing that you can do with exponents and with the calculator is what's called scientific notation. And scientific notation is just a way that we write really, really long numbers. Maybe we don't want to write all the decimal places that go behind it, so we write it in a simpler form in scientific notation. And so the way that we write a number in scientific notation, we write our number, and that number is times 10 to whatever the exponent is. And so, for instance, let's say I had 351 million. And, whoops, I don't know how to write million today. And so what I want to do with scientific notation is I want to make this number between 1 and 9. So it has to be a 1-digit number, basically. So what I do is I move my decimal over to make it a number between 1 and 9. So with any whole number, always imagine that you've got a decimal behind it. And so I'm going to count it over until I make this a number between 1 and 9. So I move it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so it's important to remember how many times we counted it over. So I'm going to change that into 3.51. And then we're going to bring down this times 10. And so the number of times we moved our decimal over, that 8 times, that becomes our exponent. And so that is how we write things in scientific notation. And so if we were going to put this in our calculator, let's say they gave us the number and they say, hey, here's this number in scientific notation, write the number as a normal number. So we just type it in, 3.51 times 10 to the 8th. So remember that TP key and then enter. And that's what we get. We get 351 million. Now let's say that we had a small number that we want to put in scientific notation. So let's say we have, 0 0.4 zeros, 207. And we want to put this in scientific notation. So again, I'm going to count. I need to make this a number between 1 and 9. So I'm going to need to move my decimal after my 2. So when I do that, I have to move my decimal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. So that becomes 2.07 times 10. And then our exponent is going to be 5 because that is how many times we moved our decimal. And so I want to make sure that I did this right. So I'm going to type this in my calculator, 2.07 times 10. And then to get my exponent, remember I hit my TP button and then the 5. And I hit enter. Oops, I made a mistake. Sorry about that. So let me, excuse me, let me erase this. Let me explain this again. Okay. So I have 0 point and 4 zeros behind that. And I have 207. So same thing, we want to make this a number between 1 and 9. So I'm going to move this over until it's after the number 2 and make that 2.07. So that part I showed you right. Sorry about that. Times 10. And since we moved our decimal to the right, our exponent is going to be a negative. And so how many places did I move my decimal? I moved it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 10 to the negative 5. So when we put this in our calculator, we should get this number right here. So 2.07 times 10, TP button, negative 5, enter. Yep, and that is what we got. So not only can we use exponents and square roots and something like that, we use them for scientific notation. Now another thing to remember with this calculator, sometimes they are going to give you square root problems that look a little different. So maybe they give me something like this. And they say, what is the square root of 90? And they want me to estimate it. So remember, estimate is just when you find something close to it. You're guessing is basically as good as you can. So when I get a question like this, 90 isn't a perfect square. That means that there isn't a number times itself that gives me 90. So I need to think of two numbers that are perfect squares that 90 falls between. So I know that 9 times 9 gives me 81. And I know that 10 times 10 gives me 100. So I know that the square root of 90 is somewhere between 9 and 10. So it's somewhere between these two. And so what I can do when I put this in my calculator, so I'm going to hit second square root button. Now, whenever you see the parentheses, that is telling you that when you do the square root, it's going to give you a decimal. And I don't want that in this case. So I'm going to clear. And I want to change the mode of my calculator. So I'm going to hit mode. And then I'm going to scroll down to math print. highlight it and hit enter. And then I'm going to hit second mode to quit. So now I'm going to do this again. Hit second, x squared, and then I'm going to type 90 and hit enter. So it gives me this answer of 3, the square root of 10. So the number 3 comes from them getting the square root of 9. So I know that the square root of 9 is 3. And 10 doesn't have a perfect square root. So really, it's like they did this. It's like they said, okay, to get 90, I have the square root of 9 times 10. Now I can get the square root of 9, that's 3, but 10 isn't a perfect square. So it's just going to stay like it is. And that was how we get 3 square root of 10. But let's say we get a problem that looks like this. So it's exactly what we've been doing. There is just a fraction on the inside. But really what we're doing, it's almost like we have 2 separate square root problems. So really this is the square root of 13 divided by the square root, oops, I meant to write 100. My apologies. Divided by the square root of 100. Now, 100 is a perfect square, so I can put that in my calculator and I'm going to get a whole number. I get the number 10. But what happens when I put the square root of 13 in here? So there isn't a square root of 13. It doesn't exist because it is not a perfect square. So really we get the square root of 13 divided by 10. But let's say they wanted this as a decimal. So I would go back, do my square root of 13, and I said that 10 was the square root of 100. So I'd put the square root of 13 in first. Oops, actually I'm going to change the mode first to classic, hit enter, and then second quit. And then I'm going to get the square root of 13 and hit enter. And then I'm going to divide that by 10. And so I get 0.36055, yada, yada, yada. And so that is my answer as a fraction, or as a decimal. Now what if I got something like this? Now, remember, if there is a 3 in front of the square root, it's what's called a cube root. And so we put that in our calculator by typing this number first. So I'm going to type 3. Then you hit second and the TP button, or the caret key. And then you type the number on the inside of the square of the root and hit enter. And we get 2. So that's how you do square roots and exponents and scientific notation. So I hope this video helped you out too. Be sure to check out our Google Classroom for some more videos on how to use the calculator, math, social studies, that kind of stuff. And if you've got any questions, be sure to comment on our post in the Google Classroom, on Facebook. Just get in touch with us. I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.